Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We return to the slave woman. We return to this prophecy that at the end of history there will be slavery. That the greatest slavery of all is not the slavery which is behind us, but the slavery which is ahead of us. And we know why that slavery is coming. Because someone wants to impose a universal dictatorship upon the whole world, including Venezuela, including Russia, so that they can rule the world from Jerusalem and then declare, I am the Messiah. We understand that. And we know that there is a political strategy through which they achieve that objective. But we are devoting today to the study of the economic strategy through which they achieve the power to rule the world. And in that economic strategy we have located Riba. And this morning we looked at Riba in the Quran by name. And we found that when Allah spoke of Riba in the Quran, He was speaking about lending money on interest. And we've explained why He has prohibited it. If you allow money to be lent on interest, then the rich will remain permanently rich and keep on growing richer. And the poor will be imprisoned in permanent poverty and grow constantly poorer. And if the one who wants to rule the world can get the rich on his side, then he will use the rich to control the poor, to control the world. So simple, the evil genius at work. In this session, we want to look at a second form of riba. Yes, in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, there is a hadith recorded in which the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, that riba is of 70 different parts. Ajza. The smallest part of riba is equivalent to a man marrying his own mother. That's how bad it is. But we are not talking about the parts of riba. We are talking about the different kinds of riba. The first was money being lent on interest. Now let us introduce you to another form, another kind of riba. 3 times in the Quran Allah has commanded, with reference first of all to the economy at the time of Shu'aib alayhi salam. The command is, وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ. Do not diminish people's property, the value of people's property. This is haram. In the process of diminishing the value of people's property. You consume their wealth in such a way that their loss is your gain. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَ النَّاسِ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Their loss is your gain. Do not diminish the value of people's property. The Americans have a pretty phrase for it. Don't rip off people. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, if you meet a man coming to the market to sell his goods and you buy his goods from him before he could enter the market, and when he entered the market he found that he could have gotten a better price in the market, that's riba. That's riba, said the Prophet ﷺ. You exploited his ignorance of the market price to extract a gain or a profit for you greater than that to which you were justly entitled. That's the elegant way of describing what the Americans call a rip-off. From this, we conclude that any transaction based on deception, which yields a gain, an advantage, a profit greater than that to which one is justly entitled, would be riba. So every rip-off is riba. I want to introduce you in this session to the greatest rip-off since Adam alayhi salam set foot on earth. Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu once came to the Prophet ﷺ and offered him some dates. The Prophet looked at the dates. He said, Bilal, these are very high quality dates. Where did you get them? Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, O Messenger of Allah, I had 2 kilograms, if you'll allow me to use that measurement, of inferior quality dates. Maybe the 2 kilograms were worth $25 each, $50. And I exchanged them for this 1 kilogram of superior quality dates, which probably was worth $50. So in value, they were equal. I exchanged these 2 kilograms for this 1 kilogram. Bilal, said the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, Bilal, this is the essence of riba. Bilal, what you should have done was to sell the 2 kilograms and use that money to buy the 1 kilogram. But a direct exchange of dates for dates, which was an unequal exchange, was haram, was riba. Why? Why? 100 years ago, even a schoolboy could answer that question. Today, not even Darul Uloom Zakaria in Johannesburg could answer that question. Yeah. It's not even Darul Uloom Newcastle can answer that question. Why? To find out why an unequal exchange of dates was haram and riba, but an unequal exchange of camels was not. That Ali was haram and riba. But an unequal exchange of camels was not. That Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu exchanged one camel for 4, or one camel for 20, I think. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala exchanged one camel for 4. But that was not haram and that was not riba. But the unequal exchange of dates was riba. And why was it riba? In answering that question, we are introduced to the subject of what is money in Islam. What is money in the Quran? What is money in the Sunnah? I gave this lecture at Darul Uloom Newcastle in South Africa. And the head of the Darul Uloom, may Allah have mercy on his soul, the venerable Maulana Seema, was 80-something years of age. He just died recently. The old man was sitting there for 2 hours for the lecture. And at the end of the lecture, he said to me, "We have to teach this subject in the Darul Uloom." Meaning, it's not taught. It's not taught. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he gave a command. When a transaction is such that it involves an exchange of gold for gold, or silver for silver, or wheat for wheat, or barley for barley, or dates for dates, or salt for salt. 6 of them. You can't see it, but you can hear it. Gold, silver, wheat, barley, dates, salt. It must be equal for equal. You cannot have an unequal exchange. Otherwise, it will be riba. Before we ask the question, why would it be riba? Let us look at these 6. What is common to all 6? This is a hadith, incidentally, which the world of Islam is very familiar, very familiar. Gold for gold, silver for silver, etc. What is common to all 6 is that they were all used as money. That when gold or silver coins were in scarce supply in the market, in Medina, they would use dates as money. And so from this hadith, we get a definition of money in the Sunnah. That money was either precious metals, gold and silver, or commodities of food consumption, which were in abundant supply in the market, and which had a shelf life. So you wouldn't use mangoes as money, because your money would be rotting. What was common to all of these 6 is that the value of the money was inside the money. The money had intrinsic value. What was common to all 6 is that the value of the money, despite fluctuations based on demand and supply, the value was always value created by Allah. And so we get the definition of money in the Sunnah. Because dates were used as money, if we allowed an unequal exchange of dates, then I can lend money on interest. I just give you 1 kilogram and you will return to me 2 kilograms after 1 year. So you would open the door for the moneylender if you allow an unequal exchange of money, the same money being used on both sides. But you could not use animals as money, because you know the one, I got a goat as my salary, and I was taking the goat home. The goat fell down, died. So when I reached home, I said to my wife, salary died. Salary died. So she said, go tell the boss. So I went to the boss, I said, boss, salary died. He said, but when I gave you salary, salary was alive. Since animals can fall ill, since animals can die, animals could not be used as money. And therefore you could have an unequal exchange of camels. Now then, this is money in the Sunnah. Money with intrinsic value. Money which is either precious metals or commodities of food consumption in abundant supply in the market, and which had a shelf life. Money with value, despite fluctuations based on demand and supply, with value created by Allah. Only He can create wealth out of nothing. He is Badi'us samawati wal ard. He creates out of nothing. He is Fatir. He creates from point of origin, Fatir. He is Khaliq. He creates and He fashions. But He is also Badi'us samawati wal ard, who creates ab novo, creates from nothing. Is this money also in the Quran? Yes, it is. In Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it Tawbah? Or is it, I'm forgetting now. He takes to task the Israelite people. وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Where's the Hafiz? Where's the Hafiz? Which surah is it? All right, well, you can get it in my book. وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. And amongst them, the Ahlul Kitab. مَنْ إِن تَأْمَنْهُ بِكِنْتَارٍ يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ. If you entrust him with a kintar, which is a treasure, about, say, 1,200 ounces of gold, enough to buy a house in San Francisco. When you want it back, يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ. He returned it to you. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ إِن تَأْمَنْهُ بِدِينَارٍ لَا يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ. And amongst them there are those who, if you entrust him with 1 dinar, when you want it back, he won't give it back to you. إِلَّا مَا دُمْتَ عَلَيْهِ قَائِمًا. The only way you can get it back is if you stand there demanding it and pounding for it. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا لَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ السَّبِيلُ. This is because of the double standards we talked about in the previous session. That we have one code of morality amongst ourselves, and we do not have to apply that code of morality with these cockroaches. الأميون ويقولون على الله الكذب وهم يعلمون. But they tell a lie against Allah. They do it knowingly. They have changed the word of Allah. I couldn't preach this in New York today. I could have done it 5 years ago. Sorry, 10 years ago. But today I cannot deliver this lecture in New York. They changed the word of Allah. But in this ayah, the word dinar is present. And the word dinar in the Quran refers to a gold coin. No one challenges that. And then in Surah to Yusuf, they took him out of the well and they took him to Misr. And when the Quran says Misr, it is not referring to the whole of Egypt. No. Misr at that time was only the eastern delta between the Nile and the Red Sea, where Banu Israel had settled. That's Misr. And they sold him in Misr. وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. They sold him for a few measly dirhams. And a dirham in the Quran is a silver coin. Last night we had the word warik in the masjid. And so in the Quran we have money. And money in the Quran is precious metals. And money in the Sunnah is precious metals as well. And when there is a shortage of gold and silver, then you can use commodities. If you are in the Indonesian island of Java, oh, that's a beautiful island, you must visit Java. Rice, hundreds and hundreds of acres, miles and miles and miles of lush green grass, rice. So if you're in Java and you run short of Sunnah money, gold and silver coins, what would you use as money? Rice, of course. Even though rice is not in this list, it is a commodity of food consumption. It is in abundant supply in the market. It has a shelf life. And if you're in Cuba, you know Fidel Castro doesn't smoke cigars anymore. You know that? Huh? Right. Good. So don't tell me tobacco, eh? If you're in Cuba and you want to bring back Sunnah money, you don't have gold and silver, what would you use as money? You would use sugar. Sugar. It's so simple. Now then, so long as we use this money, the money that Allah and His Messenger has ordained that we use, this money functioned successfully as money. What are the functions of money? Number one, money functions as a medium of exchange for buying and selling. Notice, I am teaching this subject so simply. There is nothing complicated here. And so when you go back home and you have to teach the subject, please teach it simply and do not make it complicated. It's a simple subject. If you have to look at the functions of money, you would find that money functions as a medium of exchange for buying and selling. I need a haircut. And Aisha said to me, I don't have time to cut your hair, you have to go to the barber this time. Because, I don't have time, so I say, Aisha, come cut for me. So I went to the barber, and he cut my hair, and when he's finished cutting my hair, I offered him my book, Suratul Kahf on the Modern Age. He looked at me, he smiled, he said, Sheikh, I'm not interested in your book. Barter has its limitations. And the Lord, who is all-wise, would know that. And so I need something called money that I can pay the barber for cutting my hair. And then he can use that money to go and buy a kilogram of tomatoes. And so the first function of money is to be a medium of exchange. Gold and silver, wheat and barley function successfully, except that when you're using commodities as money, it will only be microtransactions, not macro. You can't buy a house with gold or with wheat. Microtransactions, temporarily. The second function of money is to be a measure of value. What is the value of a haircut? And what is the value of the book? So long as mankind use real money, it always functions successfully as a measure of value. And so the black African woman, in her own country incidentally, in her own Africa, who had to work as a domestic servant. Sometimes not one, you got 6 of them in her home. When she works, the black African woman, I know her, because everywhere I went, I used to meet her. When she worked for a whole month, she would get a wage that was a just wage on the basis of the measure of the value of her labor. And so our money functions successfully, not only as a medium of exchange, but also as a measure of value. Can I get a water, please? Water. Thank you. But money has a third function to perform, and that is to be a store of value. In Surah Al-Kahf, when that man dug a hole, remember, and buried his money in the hole, and then he built a wall, and he prayed because maybe he was terminally ill, and he had little children, that his orphan children, when they grow up and become adults, that they would be able to get the money he had left behind for them. If he left behind 100 gold coins, and the 100 gold coins could buy 100 camels, then he would want that his money 20 years from now would have stored its value, preserved its value, so that 20 years later, when his children got that money from the hole, that money could still buy 100 camels, provided demand and supply being constant. Our money, the money in the Quran, the money in the Sunnah, perform that function successfully of being a store of value. And this is how the world traded. If you wanted to rip off someone, what you'd have to do is to mix some kind of alloy with the gold, or chip the gold, used to appoint market police. And the market police will be moving around in the market. And if anyone was caught with money which was not the correct weight or purity, right there in the market you would be tried, right there in the market you would be sentenced, right there in the market you would be punished. The State University of New York, in a place called Binghamton, is famous for scholars who have distinguished themselves in the study of the free and the fair market. And they have come to the conclusion that the last free and fair market that the world ever experienced was the market of the Ottoman Islamic Empire. When the strange and mysterious alliance took place between European Jews and European Christians, that strange and mysterious alliance created modern Western civilization, the modern West. And the modern West then proceeded to attack money, to corrupt money, to destroy real money, and to substitute it and replace it with artificial money, bogus, fraudulent money that was totally and utterly haram. If only we could get the muftis of Islam to understand that. They listen to me, but it goes through one ear and it goes out through the other. They've been listening to me for years now, and they're saying, no, Imran is wrong. Imran is wrong. What they did was to remove gold and silver from the market and to eventually impose upon mankind a law prohibiting the use of gold as money. You probably, some of you hearing this for the first time, that it is now prohibited by international law to use a gold dinar as money. But Allah and His Messenger have ordained as money. They began the process of corrupting money with the creation of the Bank of England at the end of the 17th century. We cannot today give you the history. It's a very interesting history of the stages through which they went through, but Dajjal works carefully, inch by inch. And he does not want your eyes to open to understand what he is doing. So he eventually gave you television that will put you to sleep. The process commenced with the creation of the Bank of England. And England issuing paper currencies. The paper currency was supposed to be redeemable in gold. Redeemable meaning you could take your paper to the bank and the bank will give you the gold, redeemable. But you are setting up people to rip them off because you issue more paper than you have gold. And when they realize that and they rush to get back their gold, all fall down. And so they are ripped off. And this happened within a few years of the creation of the Bank of England. The process continued after the British ruling state began to transfer power or the transference of power was taking place to the second ruling state, the United States. The US dollar is redeemable in gold at 20 US dollars for 1 ounce of gold. But somewhere around, must have been 1926 or 27, if I'm wrong, correct me, the Federal Reserve was created. Somewhere around there, the Federal Reserve, a private bank, which seeks to impersonate a national bank, a state bank, private bank. And then suddenly the US government does something strange at the behest of the Federal Reserve. In April of 1931, most Americans don't know this. In April of 1931, the US government declared the use of gold, keep gold coins and gold bullion to be illegal. In other words, they demonetized gold. Gold is no longer legal tender. And if you're caught with gold after a certain date, if you do not hand it over to the government, meaning to the Federal Reserve, who will give you $20 to each gold coin that you give them, 1 ounce of gold. If you're caught with gold after a certain time, gold coins or gold bullion or gold certificates, you go to jail for 6 months and pay 10,000 US dollars in fine. That's a lot of money in those days. And so all the Americans rushed to give their gold to Uncle Sam and to take the paper at $20 an ounce. And then, of course, the sensible ones, the ones who knew the scam that was coming along, they didn't give Uncle Sam their gold. No. They changed all the paper that they had for gold. And then they shipped the gold to Switzerland, outside of Uncle Sam's reach, because they knew what's coming. And this is why today, you see all around the United States, people wanted to buy gold, because they know what's coming. In January of 1934, the US government, at the behest of the Federal Reserve, now remonetizes gold. It cancels the legislation. You can now come back and buy back your gold from Uncle Sam. But Uncle Sam changed the value of his paper. His paper was $20 to 1 ounce of gold. And Uncle Sam decided from this day it'll now be 35. 35. I'm telling you this story so you could understand what Allah is saying in the Quran when He said, وَلَا تَبْخَسُ النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ. And He said it 3 times in the Quran. So we rushed to buy back our gold from Uncle Sam. And we paid him $35 an ounce. After the American people had bought back their gold, Uncle Sam was left with 41% of the wealth of the country in his pocket. By the simple expedient of devaluing the money, by the simple expedient of devaluing the paper, the American government ripped off the American people to the tune of 41% of their wealth. You did not have gold. And so Richard Nixon went to Camp David and then on Sunday announced to the world, we gave our word, but we don't have to keep it. And he tore up Bretton Woods. That's what he repudiated, a treaty obligation, just repudiated it. And the very foundation of international law, on the basis of which we can have an ordered world, is pacta sunt servanda. Pacta sunt servanda. The treaty obligations must be honored. Pacta sunt servanda. Treaty obligations must be honored. Surah Al-Ma'idah begins with that same statement. At the very beginning of Surah Al-Ma'idah, when you give your word, you must keep your word. And if you cannot, then seek forgiveness from Allah, give charity, free a slave, fast, and make tawbah, repent for it. But no, he said, we gave our word, we don't have to keep it. And he tore it up. So since September 1971, no paper money in the world, none, is redeemable in gold on the basis of law. It's just paper. By 1973, when the war took place between Israel and the Arabs, the US dollar had collapsed to 160 from 35. 160. By January 1980, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, the US dollar collapsed to 850 to 1 ounce of gold. And as we speak now, you can go on the internet and check. I'm sure it's somewhere around 1,000 now as I speak. Above 1,000. Above, just cross 1,000. What happens when the value of money falls? The answer was provided in 1931 with that test shot. If you did not understand it, what happened in 1931 should make it clear that when the value of this money falls, people are ripped off. There's a massive transfer of wealth from the unsuspecting masses to that predatory elite. This is the biggest rip-off that mankind has ever had the misfortune to experience from the time that Adam alayhi salam set foot on earth to this day. And you don't need a degree in economics to understand it. I have just explained it to you so simply. It is so easy to understand. I didn't even have to use any sophisticated, complicated language. Even a farmer could understand what I have just explained. This is riba. And they have used this bogus and fraudulent and utterly haram monetary system as a vehicle for riba. And they have ripped off mankind, and the rip-off is complete. It's finished. They have already impoverished the masses around the world. And they have already transferred that wealth to the elite around the world, who now live in unprecedented wealth and luxury. In Egypt, in Indonesia, you should see them in their 5-star restaurants having dinner, with, of course, so many security guards outside, because they're scared of the poor. The rip-off is complete. through Riba. And they are now set to rule the world. But this is not the end of the story. Tomorrow they would not need the paper money anymore. When Israel takes over from the United States as a new ruling state in the world, the US dollar will have to give way as the international currency. So I ask myself, which currency is going to take over? Is it the Israeli shekel? And while all the money in the world is going down in value, Israel's money is not. And then I realized, no, they're not going to remain with this bogus and fraudulent monetary system of paper currencies, because they have something better than that in store for you. At least with the paper currency, you could take it home and give it to your wife and tell her, put it away. At least with the paper currency, you could keep it at home. Nobody knows how much money you have. At least with the paper currency, you can give it in charity and nobody will know how much you gave and who you gave it to. They don't want you to do that. They don't want you to be able to conceal from them how much you have. They don't want you to be able to give even 1 cent to anybody. And they don't know about it. Well, how are they going to do that? Are they going to appoint police in every home? They don't need to do that. All that they have to do is to trigger a 2012, I believe it's called, to trigger a monstrous, a massive catastrophe in the world which will bring down the whole thing. The US dollar crashes, and it'll bring down with it all the paper money in the world. And if you're caught with the paper, you can use it as wallpaper. And they have something to replace it. It's money you can't feel, you can't touch. It's money you can't see. Who is going to accept money I can't see and money I can't touch? No. They're going to say, well, we're bringing to the world progress. It's called a cashless economy. And that's supposed to be progress. A cashless economy. You can't pay with paper anymore. That's old-fashioned. No. Now it's electronic money. Are they going to get away with it? Electric impulses? That is now money? Yesterday you took a piece of paper, you printed a picture on it, you put a number on it, and you assigned an entirely fictitious value to it. And you made wealth out of nothing. That's shirk. But all the cattle in the world accepted it and were using it. And in the process of accepting your paper and using your paper, they were themselves transferring their wealth to you. You have to hand it to Dajjal, he's real smart. But now they don't need that anymore. Electronic impulses will now become money. Governments will no longer be able to issue money. No. Banking system around the world and a computer keyboard, and they will control the banking system. And so all the money in the money system of the world will be in the banking system. And so they will know how much money you have. You can't hide it. And they will know how you're using your money. They will know when you bought and how much you bought and how much you paid. Every single thing is recorded. And when you give money to the masjid, they will know who you are. When you give money in charity, they know who you are. And if you're so stupid as to send any money at all to Palestine, they're going to send you to Guantanamo. So what we have in store for us tomorrow is the equivalent of a financial Guantanamo. It's not just anymore riba being used to rip you off. It is more than that. That the new monetary system is meant to not only rip you off but also to enslave you, to rob you of your freedom. This is Dajjal's most dangerous weapon. And he's already used the weapon. What do? How do we respond? Tomorrow we're going down to Cedras. We say it is not possible to respond with a macro response. No. We don't have the power for that. We say only a micro response is possible. And that micro response is a remotely located Muslim village in which we will bring back the Sunnah money, gold and silver, and if you do not allow us to use gold and silver, then we will use commodities of food consumption in abundant supply in the market.